Okay, let's get started then. So please change it to this. Um, Development. Everything good, right? Okay. By concept. Okay. Inheritance. I was on to specificity. Yeah, okay. Specificity. Once the applicable style sheet has been chosen, there may still be conflicts. Therefore, the cascade continues at the rule level. When two rules in a single style sheet conflict, the type of selector is used to determine the winner. The more specific the selector, the more weight it is given to override the conflicting declaration. Okay. It's a little soon to be discussing specificity because we've only looked at one type of selector and the least specific type at that. For now, put the term specificity at the concept of some selector overriding other on your radar. We will represent in chapter 11 when you have more selector types under your belt. Okay. So, assigning importance. If you want a rule not to be overridden by a subsequent conflicting rule, include the uh, bang important indicator just after the property value and before the semicolon for the rule. Okay. Even if the browser encounters an inline styles later in the document which should override a document-wide style sheet, this one, that paragraph will still be blue because the rule with the important indicator cannot be overridden by other styles in the author's style sheet. Okay. The only way an important rule may be overridden is by a conflicting rule in a reader user style sheet that has also been marked important. This is to ensure that special reader requirements such as large type for the visually impaired are never overridden. Okay, if there is user style sheet. Based on the previous examples, if the reader's style sheet includes this rule, the text would still be blue because all other styles, even those not marked important, take precedence over the reader's style sheet. Okay, the text would still be blue because all other styles. However, if conflicting reader style is marked important like this, the paragraph will be black and cannot be overridden. Okay, got it. Style sheet hierarchy. Style sheet information can come from various sources listed from the general to specific items lower in the list. Items lower in the list will override items above them. Okay. So we have browser default setting, user style setting, set in browser as a reader style sheet. Okay. Then linked external style sheet, linked imported style sheet added with import function, embedded style sheets, style inline style sheet. Okay, any style root by order. Okay, so this is the high. This has the highest priority. Rule order. Finally, if there are conflicts within a style rule of identical weight, whichever one comes last wins. Okay. In this scenario, the paragraph text will be green because the last rule in the style sheet, that is the one closest to the content in the document, overrides earlier ones. The same thing happens when conflicting style occurs within a single declaration stack. Okay, within a single, okay, different. The resulting color will be green because the last declaration overrides the previous two. It is easy to accidentally override previous declarations within a rule when you get into compound properties. So this is an important behavior to keep in mind. Okay. Note, the last one listed wins rule applies in other contexts in CSS as well. For example, external style sheet listed later in the source will be given precedent over those listed above them. Okay. The box model. As long as we are talking about the big CSS concepts, it is only appropriate to introduce the cornerstone of the CSS visual formatting system, the box model. CSS visual formatting system, the box model. The easiest way to think of the box model is that browsers see every element of the page, both block and inline, as being contained in a little rectangular box. You can apply properties such as borders, margins, padding, and background to these boxes and even reposition them on the page. Okay. We're going to go into a lot more detail about the box model in chapter 14. But having a general feel for the box model will benefit you even as we discuss text and backgrounds in the following two chapters. To see the elements roughly the way the browser sees them, I've written style rules to add borders around every content in a simple article. Okay. Figure shows the result. The border reveals the shape of each box element. There are boxes around the inline as well. Okay, we have emphasized here, emphasized. Okay. Notice that the block element boxes expand to fill the available width of the browser window, which is nature of the block element in the normal document flow. Inline boxes encompasses just the characters. Okay, so these boxes fill up to the width of the window contain, and inline just fill the boxes wrap around the characters. Okay, grouped selectors. Okay, different. Hey, this is a good opportunity to show you a handy style rule shortcut. If you ever need to apply the same style sheet property to a number of elements, you can group the selectors into one rule by separating them with commas. Okay. This one rule has the same effect as the 5 rules listed above previously. Grouping them makes future edits more efficient and results in a smaller size file. Right. Pop quiz. Can you guess why I didn't just add the border property to the body element? Because it would a big around the whole, because border is one of the properties that is not inherited. Okay, it did inherit all the elements. Okay, because border is a property that is not inherited. Right. Now you have two selector types in your toolbox, a simple element selector and grouped selector. Move forward with CSS, online resources, right? Okay, so a quick history of CSS. The first official version of CSS was officially released in 1996 and included properties for adding font, color, and spacing instructions to page elements. Unfortunately, lack of dependable browser support prevented the widespread adoption of CSS for several years. CSS2, released in 1998, it almost notably added properties for positioning that allowed CSS to be used for page layout. It also introduced styles for other media types such as print, handheld, and oral, and more sophisticated methods for selecting elements for styling. Revision 2 makes some minor adjustments and became a full recommendation in 2011. CSS3 is different from prior versions in that it has been divided into many individual modules, each addressing a feature such as animation, multiple column layout, or borders. While some modules are being standardized, others remain experimental. In that way, browser developers can begin implementing and we can begin using one feature at a time of waiting for an entire specification to be ready. Okay, how's it going? Going good? Right. In fact, many developers use enhanced CSS3 features even though they aren't universally supported, as long as the fallback is usable and no content is lost. They can be used as frosting on an otherwise stable design. Right, moving forward with CSS. This chapter covered all the fundamentals of cascading style sheets, including rules and text, ways to apply styles to a document, and the central concepts of inheritance, the cascade, and the box model. Style sheets should no longer be a mystery, and from this point on, will merely be building on this foundation by adding properties and selectors to your arsenal, as well as expanding on the concepts introduced here. CSS is a vast topic, well beyond the scope of this book. Bookstores and the web are loaded with information about style sheets for all skill levels. I've compiled a list. Okay, so I'll keep this in mind. So provide a list of popular tools. CSS cookbooks here. Cookbooks are great. Okay, online resources. Well done. Will it still work? Link in data. Cascading style sheets. Completed work. Software learning CSS. Zen Garden. Your designs. Oh. Damn. Okay. CSS tools. Here are a couple of tools that I can personally recommend. Web Developer Extension. Web developers are raving about the Web Developer Extension written by Chris Pedrick. The extension adds a toolbar to the browser with tools that enable you to analyze and manipulate any page in the window. You can edit the style sheets for the page you are viewing as well as the information here. With authoring programs, current authoring programs such as Adobe Dreamweaver and Microsoft Expression Web can be configured to write a style sheet for you automatically as you design the page. The downside is that they are not always written in the most efficient manner. Okay, test yourself. Block code is the selector, line height is the property, 1.5 is the value. I don't know the declaration. Declaration is simple. Okay, what color? It will be gray. Rewrite each of the CSS examples. Some of them are completely incorrect. Okay, I don't think this is right. Font family, sans serif, font size. There is no. There should be a Then we have this background body, background color, color margin, background color black. Uh, Sorry. Then all these here. Okay. P color, block code color white, LI color white, style red. Have to define strong, right? Should be color red. Yeah, I am. Okay. Circle all element in the diagram that you would expect to appear in red when the following style root is applied to a document. Okay. Div intro color red. Okay. You will see these paragraph strong unordered list and all the list items, right? Div intro list items color white. This list item was selector, I guess. Okay. Then we move on to chapter 12, formatting text plus more selectors. Now that you've gotten your feet wet formatting text, are you ready to jump into the deep end? By the end of this chapter, you'll pick up 15 new CSS properties used to manipulate the appearance of text. Along the way, you'll also learn how to use more powerful selectors for targeting elements in a particular context and with a specific ID or class name. The nature of the web makes specifying type tricky, if not downright frustrating, particularly if you have experience designing for print. There is no way to know for sure whether the font you specify will be available or how large or how small the type will appear when it hits user's browser. We'll address the best practices for dealing with these challenges. Okay. Throughout this chapter, we'll be sprucing up a Black Goose Bistro online menu, similar to the one we marked up in chapter 5. I encourage you to work along with the exercises to get a feel for how the properties work. Okay. Figure 12.1 shows how the menu looks before and after we're done. It's not a masterpiece because we're just scratching the surface of CSS here, but at least the text is more refined. Okay, the font properties. When I design a text document, one of the first thing I do specify a font. And CSS fonts are specified using little bundle of font related properties for typeface, size, weight and font style. There is also a shortcut property that lets you specify all of the font attributes in font related properties. Okay. The first and second. Oh, looks cool, dude. Specifying the font name. Choosing table. Table choosing a typeface or font family, as it is called in CSS, for text is a good place to start. Okay. Let's begin with the font family property and its values. Okay. Font family values applies to all element, inherits, yes. One or more font or generic font family names separated by commas and inherit. Okay. So use the font family property to specify a font or list of font known as a font stack by name. Font family Arial, font family Courier, monospace, Doru Sans, Verdana, Sans Serif. Okay. Here are some important syntax requirements. All font names, with the exception of generic font families, must be capitalized. Example, use. Okay. Use commas to separate multiple font names as shown in the second and third examples. Okay. Why is it in? Notice that the font name contains a character space, sans. Third example must appear within quotation marks. Okay. A word about property listing. Each new property listing in this book is accompanied by information on how it behaves and how to use it. Here's a quick explanation of each part of the property. Okay. Values. These are accepted values for the property. Predefined keyword value appears in code and must be typed in exactly shown. Okay. Default. This is the value that will be used for the property by default. That is, if no value is specified. Note that the default browser style sheet values may vary from the default defined in CSS. Okay. Applies to. Some properties apply onto applies to all elements font family. Okay. Some properties applies only to certain types of element such as block or table elements. Inherit. This indicates whether the property will be passed down to the selected element's descendants. Okay. You might be asking, why specify more than one font? That's a good guess, and it brings us to one of the challenges of specifying fonts for web pages. Font limitation. Browsers are limited to displaying fonts they have access to. Traditionally, that meant the font set were already installed on the user's hard drive. In 2010, however, there were a boom in browser support for embedded web fonts using the CSS font face rule. So it became possible for designers to provide their own fonts. Say hello to web font sidebar. Okay. But back to a font family rule, even when you specify that the font should be Futura in a style rule, if the browser can't find it, for example, the font is not installed without the provided web font face to load, the browser uses its default font instead. Fortunately, CSS allows us to provide a list of backup fonts, the font stack we saw earlier, should our first choice not be available. If the first specified font is not found, if the first specified font is not found, the browser tries the next one and down through the list until it finds one that works. In the third font family rule, if the browser doesn't find Doru Sans, it will use Verdana. If not Verdana, it will use Sans Serif. Okay. Say hello to web fonts. The ability to provide your own font for use on web page has been around since 1998, but it was never feasible due to browser inconsistencies. Fortunately, that story has changed, and now web fonts are a perfectly viable option. The web has never looked better. There is a lot to say about web fonts, so this sidebar is merely an introduction to the highlights, starting with the challenges. What took you so long? There have been two main hurdles to including fonts with web pages. First, there is the problem that different browsers support different font formats. Most fonts come in OpenType or TrueType formats, but Internet Explorer only accepts its proprietary embedded OpenType. The good news is that there is a new standard for packaging fonts for delivery to web pages that all browser vendors that even IE are implementing. The new format, Web Open Font Format, is a container that packages font files for web delivery. Now that IE9 is supporting OAuth, one day it may be all we need. As of this writing, however, we still need to provide the same font in a number of different formats. The other issue with providing fonts on web page is that the font companies, called the foundries, are concerned, and I freaked out, that their fonts will be setting vulnerably on service and available for download. Fonts cost a lot to create and are very valuable. Most come with licenses that cover very specific use by a limited number of machines and free to download for whatever is usually not included. So to link a web font, you need to use a web font legally and provide it in a way that all browsers support. There are two general approaches to providing font: host them yourself or use web font services. Okay, host your own. In the host your own option, you find the font you want, put it on your server in all the required formats, and link it to your web using font face rule. Find a font. This can be a bit of challenge because EULA for virtually all commercial font does not cover web page. Be sure to purchase the additional web license if it is available. However, thanks to demand, some foundries are opening fonts up for web use, and there are a growing number of open source fonts that you can use for free. The service FontSpring by Ethan Dunnan is a great place to purchase fonts that have a web license that you can use on your site or your computer. The site FontSquirrel is a great source for open source fonts that can be used for commercial purposes. Let me check it out. Fontsquirrel.com. These are the various fonts. OTF, TTF, OTF. Nice. Then save it in multiple formats. As of this writing, providing multiple formats is a reality. There are tools that will convert your source font into other formats, but there is a service that will take your font and make everything you need for your font face generator. Font face generator. Check out options for font generator. Okay, upload font. Oh, a font generator. Right. Okay. So as of this writing, providing multiple fonts in reality. Go to the page, upload your font, and it gives back the font in TTF, EOT, CJ, as well as CSS code you need to make it work. Bear in mind that you should use the service only for a font that specially allows web usage, whether that font is free, open source, or commercial. Note also that you will get better quality font versions directly from a font vendor than you will using the generator. Okay. Upload to server. Developers typically keep their font files in the same directory as the CSS files, but that's just a matter of preference. If you download a package from FontSquirrel, be sure to keep the pieces together as you found them. Write code. Link the font to your site using the font face rule in a CSS document. The rule gives font a font family name that you can then reference later in a style sheet. Okay. It also lists the location of the font files in their various formats. This cross-browser code example was developed by to address the bug in IE. Okay, so you are being aware from my embedded open type IEFX font name. Okay. Then you just refer to the established font name in your rules like this. Use a font embedding service. If that seems like a lot of work, you may want to sign up with one of the font embedding service that do all the heavy lifting for you for a fee. You get access to high quality fonts and the service handles font licensing and font protection for foundries. They also generally provide an interface and tools that make embedding a font as easy as copy and paste. The services have a variety of fee structures. Some change monthly, some charge by font, some have a surcharge of bandwidth. They're generally tiered plans and that range from free to hundreds of dollars per month. Here are some of the font embedding services that are popular writing. Oh, Google Web Fonts. But it's worth doing a web search as well. Okay, let me see. Google Web Fonts. Are these all free? Serif. Filters, sort by trending, newest. These are all free, right? Okay, Google is a free service that provides access to hundreds of open source fonts that is free for commercial use. All you have to do is choose a font, then copy and paste the code they generate for you. If you don't have a font budget and you aren't too fussy about fonts, this is a wonderful way to go. Typekit, fonts.com, summing it up. Which method you use to add fonts to a site is up to your discretion. If you like total control, hosting your own font legally, of course, may be a good way to go. If you need a very particular, well-known font because your client's brand depends on it, you will probably find it on one of the web font services via price. If you want to experiment with fonts, I'm happy to choose from what's freely available that Google Font is for you. You now have a good foundation in providing web fonts. The landscape is likely to change quickly over the next few years. Be sure to do your own research. Okay. Then we move on to generic font families. That last option, some other sans font, bear most discussion. Sans serif is just one of 5 generic font families that you can specify with font family property. When you specify a generic font family, the browser chooses an available font from that stylistic category. Shows examples from each family. Generic font families names do not need to be capitalized. Okay. Serif. Example Times New Roman, Georgia. Serif typefaces have decorative slab-like appendage. Okay, this is generic, right? Then we have sans serif, Arial Black, Verdana, Tribune, as Helvetica, Geneva. Sans serif typefaces have straight letters. Okay, monospace, Korea New, Monospace, also called constant width typefaces, all characters take up same amount of space on a line. Will be no wider than. Compare this to proportional typefaces. Okay. Serif decorative, sans serif straight strokes. Okay. Monospace, cursive and fantasy. Then we have cursive. Example Apple Shenry. Cursive fonts emulate a script or handwritten appearance. Comic Sans. Hello. We have fantasy, impact, stencil, mojo. Fantasy fonts are purely decorative and would be appropriate for headlines. Other display type. Fantasy fonts are rarely used for web text due to cross-platform eligibility and legibility. Okay, font stack strategies. Right. The best practice for specifying fonts for web page is to start with your first choice, provide some similar alternative, then end with a generic font family name. That is, it is at least a family that at least gets users in the right stylistic ballpark. For example, if you want Futura in upright sans serif font, you might start with your favorite Futura. List few that are common: Universe, Tahoma, Geneva, and finish with generic sans serif. There is no limit to the number of fonts you can include, but many designers strive to keep it under 10. A good font stack should include stylistically related fonts that are known to be installed on most computers. Sticking with fonts that come with the Windows Linux operating system, as well as fonts that get installed with popular software packages, are listed as web-safe fonts to choose from. The charts and statistics provided by following sites are excellent resources for finding what fonts are most commonly used. Okay. Then go best font stack ever. Yeah, okay. There are loads of article online tooting. Right, great. The loads of articles online tooting best font stacks ever, and the font stack you use will largely be a matter of preference. The following recommendations are inspired by Michael Tuck's 8 definitive font stack and include fallback fonts for Windows, Mac, and Linux. Okay, narrow serif. We have white serif, narrow sans serif, white sans serif, and okay, maybe I'll use it, maybe I won't. If you're interested in learning more about mastering font stacks, I recommend the following articles, but be sure you do your own web research to find up-to-date well recommendations. So as you see, specifying fonts for the web is more like merely suggesting them. You don't have absolute control over which font your users will see. You might get your first choice, you might get the generic fallback. It's one of those web design quirks you learn to live with. Now seems like a good time to get started formatting the Black Goose Bistro menu. We'll add new style rules one at a time on each property. Okay. In this exercise, we'll add font to the. Okay, so I should go to chapter 11. Chapter 11 stands chapter 12. Start here. There should be final documents, menu.html. Okay, chapter 12. What is the name of the chapter? Formatting text. Formatting text. Size 12.1. Okay. Just open the document in a text editor. You can also open it in the browser to see before state. It should look similar to the page. Okay, let me see before. Yeah, right. Okay. Then I've included embedded font in this exercise to show how easily it is to do with a service like Fulfill. Document. Okay, so we're going to use an embedded style sheet for this exercise. Start by adding. Okay, we'll start with this. To the left. So within the head, I'll add style. Then I would like the main text to appear in Verdana or some other sans serif font. Instead of writing a rule for every element in the document, we will write one rule for the body element, which will be Hennepin. Okay, so I will go body, then font family, Verdana and sans serif. Right. I want a fancy black font. Okay, so let's take a look at it. Updated. Okay, so font has changed. Okay, then I want a fancy font for Black Goose Bistro. So my headline, so I choose free display font. Free display font Marco 1 from Google Web Fonts. Google gave me the code for linking the font file on their server to my HTML file. Okay. It must be placed in the head of the document, so copy and paste it as it appears. Okay, so we will go with, what is the name? Marco 1. Marco 1. Right, Marco 1. I want to link this get font, get embedded code. Okay, CSS class link. Okay, so we get pre-connect and copy code, and in the head before the title, right? And then write a rule that applies it to, we're adding head here. Okay, I apply this family Marco 1, and what is the name? Marco 1 static embedded code, and I will go Marco 1. Okay, Marco 1, and so font family, its name is Marco 1. Marco 1. Okay. Georgia, self. And then write a rule applies to H1. Notice I've specified Georgia or another serif font for fallbacks. Okay, so I will add H1, then I will go font family Marco 1, then Georgia, and any generic serif font, right? Then let's see. Yeah, okay, so it applies. Then save the document and reload the page. H1 main cursor, they look like, and this is like this. Note that you'll need to have an internet connection and a current browser to view text exercise. Okay, so we're done with this, right? Okay. Specifying the font size. Use the aptly named font size property for specifying the size of the text. Okay. Size default is medium. Values length, unit, percentage. Okay. Length unit or percentage. Then we have XX small, extra small, small, medium, large, extra large, extra large, smaller, larger. Okay, smaller, larger, and then it inherits the value. Yes, applies to all elements. Default is medium. You can specify text size in several ways. At specific size using one of the CSS length unit for a complete list. Okay, H1 1.5 M. When specifying a number of units, be sure the unit abbreviation immediately follows the number with no extra spaces. Between them. As a percentage value specified up or down from an element's default inherited size. Okay, from medium. Okay. Using one of the absolute keywords. Okay. And we are using a relative keyword larger or smaller to nudge the next text larger or smaller than the surrounding text. Okay. I'm going to cut to the chase and tell you that despite all these options, the preferred value for font size is in contemporary web design are EM measurements and percentage value or a combination of two. I'll explain other font size values in a moment, but let's start our discussion with the most prevalent approach. Both EMs and percentages are relative measurements, which means they are based on another font size, namely the inherited font size of the parent element. Okay. Percentage values. In this example, the font size of H1's parent body has been specified as 100% of the default text size, generally 16 pixels. The H1 inherits 16 pixel size from the body and applies the 150 font size values, multiplies that inherited value, resulting in H1 that is 24 pixels. Okay. If the user has her font size set to 30 pixels, for example, to read it on a television browser from across the room, the resulting H1 would be 45 pixels, but would maintain its proportion relative to the main body text, which is the idea of using relative measurements. Okay, so we have CSS units of measurement. CSS3 provides a variety of units of measurements. They fall into two broad categories. We have relative units. Relative units are based on the size of something else, such as the default text or size of the parent element. Okay. Pixel considered relative because it varies with display resolution. An unit of measurement equal to current font size. Okay, how many pixels it wants to. X height, approximately the height of lower case x. Okay, rem. The following units are new in CSS3. Browser support may take a while to ramp up. Rem. Root EM equal to the EM size of the root element. CH 0 width equal to width of 0 in the current. Viewport width unit equal to 1/100. Port height. Viewport minimum unit. Absolute units. Okay. Relative unit. Absolute unit define. Absolute units have predefined meanings or real world pixel. Pixel defined as an absolute measurement equal to 1/96 of an inch. and CSS 3. Sorry. Okay, then we have point 1/72 of an inch in CSS 2.1. Then picas. 1 pica is 12 points. Okay, so absolute units should be avoided for web page styles sheet because they are not relevant on computer screens. However, if you are creating a style sheet to be used, they must be the ticket. Did you happen to notice X is both in these slides? That's because W3 hasn't quite made up their mind. Definitions aside, in practice pixel work as an absolute measurement that is not as flexible as true relative measurements. Okay. EM measurements. Okay. I think I will be reading it later. Okay, I want EM measurements. Right.